Good afternoon and welcome everyone. Can I first check that everyone can hear me okay? If you'd like to use the chat window just to confirm that sound is indeed coming through for you, that would be great. See some responses coming through there. That's great. Sound seems to be working okay. Brilliant. Okay, thanks very much. Firstly, by way of introduction, my name is James Diffin from JISC's Regional Support Centre for Northern Ireland, and with me today in the room is my colleague Lisa Zamboglu. I'll begin with a few housekeeping items, which you'll see listed in the housekeeping items window to the right of the screen. Over to the left of the screen is the Q&A and the chat window. In order to make the best use of our time today, Lisa is going to address any questions posted in the Q&A window as and when they're posted, rather than leave them to the end of the session, so please feel free to comment at any stage. For any general feedback, you can use the chat window. Okay, let's get started. Today we're going to be looking at the Moodle virtual learning environment and one or two tips and ideas that you might well be able to integrate into your own Moodle pages to generally improve the experience that you and your learners have in the VLE. Our demonstrations today are broken up into three sections. We're going to begin by looking at some ideas regarding the visuals and aesthetics in a Moodle course page, and then move on to a little discussion about communicating information in the VLE. Finally, we're going to take some time to look at how we can use the tools that already exist within Moodle to create content within our VLE. We've also prepared an accompanying summary document for today's webinar, and you can download that from the webinar resources section in the bottom right of your screen. Okay, before we get into your demonstrations, I'd like to just take a moment to consider the grander idea of what best practice is in terms of Moodle course design and how you can implement that practice in your own VLE use. Okay, so what is best practice when it comes to Moodle course design? Well, taken in this broad sense, it's a difficult question to answer for two reasons. Firstly, online course design is still evolving. We're constantly rethinking the educational process and how we embed pedagogy into the way we're delivering online material. That all depends on the type of content we're delivering and the way in which it's being delivered, and practices have to change and adapt to meet those needs. Secondly, there's always going to be an amount of discernment regarding the people that you're trying to reach with your content, and what works for one group may not necessarily work for another. Even in today's demonstrations, you might well see things and think to yourself, oh, well, that would work really well with one group that I teach, but not necessarily with another. What we can say is this. Moodle was developed in Australia, and at one of the big Moodle conventions there, an e-learning consultant was asked this very question that we're asking ourselves now. What does a good Moodle course look like? To which he replied, it looks like the one that meets the needs of its learners. So keep that little quote in mind as we move through our demonstrations today. Think about how the tips and tools that we're presenting might meet the needs of some of your learners or help you to achieve something that you'd like to see within your own teaching and learning. With all that said, let's move into our first topic, which centers around the visuals and aesthetics of a Moodle course page. You can't underestimate just how important the look and feel of your Moodle course is. When we say look and feel, we're talking about everything from the colors, fonts and styles used, right through to the amount, type and organization of the content that greets your users. And we've prepared a little 8-minute demonstration which conveys 3 top tips for Moodle course design centered around the visuals and aesthetics of your course. I should note that if you experience any pausing or buffering during the video, just give it a few seconds to load and it'll continue again. It just depends on your connection speed. We're here at the introduction to a fictitious Moodle course, and I want to take a little look just briefly at the style of the introduction itself. So this is a little portion of text to introduce our learners to the course that they're going to be studying, but there's not much to it. You can see it's just plain black text. So we want to give this little portion of text a little bit of production value, just something that'll make it stand out and help our learners engage with it, even something as simple as doing something to highlight the little subheadings in our text. We can always do this in Moodle by clicking on the little update icon. Yours might look slightly differently, but if you hover your mouse over it, it'll always say either update or edit. So I'm going to click on that to get into a text editor. Now your text editor might look slightly different to mine depending on the version of Moodle that you're using and the way that your Moodle is set up, but they're all roughly the same as this, and they let us do this sort of the same things that we might do in Word or another piece of word processing software. We can highlight a piece of text and use, for instance, the font color options to change the color of it, or highlight a piece of text and bold or italicize it or underline it, or even change the alignment of the text itself. The thing to bear in mind whenever you're dealing with text on your Moodle course really is our first point, and that's to keep your styling simple and consistent. We could go in here and we could change this to all sorts of wonderful colours, but there's a few different problems with that. The first one is if you have usually more than 3 font styles and colours, you're increasing the cognitive load for your learners, and they're going to spend more time trying to decipher the different styles on your page rather than actually engaging with the content itself. So you want to keep it simple so that they're not distracted by all the various colours and fonts and things. There's also issues with accessibility. You don't want to use red or green text for folks that are colorblind, or an awkward to read text for anyone with a visual impairment. So the simpler you can keep it, the better. And Moodle has a few presets built into it that you can actually use to your benefit. If you look at the rest of our Moodle page here, we have a very, very simple theme in our page. You can see there's only a few colours being used here. We've got some orange here and here. We've got some grey for our text, and we've got a white background. So even going in and sort of changing a piece of text to say blue would immediately contrast with our theme, and we don't want to do that. Instead, what we can do is we can highlight, say, this little introduction here that we want to make a subheading, and come up to our toolbar here in our text editor where it says paragraph, and change that from a piece of paragraph text to one of Moodle's preset headings. So I could choose, say, heading 3, which styles it just a little bit differently but keeps it in line with the theme. And the same with this one, highlight that, change that to heading 3. We're also building up the consistency then, because we know that from now on, whenever we come to approach a subheading, we're going to use heading 3. And then it's just a matter of saving that, and then just observing how well then those little subheadings fit in with the rest of our course and with the Moodle theme as well. So for our next point, we want to take a look at the actual amount of text that we're displaying on our Moodle course page. If we look here, underneath this topic 2, we're met by quite a lot of text. And I've seen in the past many courses that almost deliver all of their course content as text on the course page itself. There's a temptation to do this because under each heading, we have a little bit of white space to fill. And we feel like we can type as much as we want. We can deliver our content to our learners through that space. But really all that space is for is a little description, a little way to introduce your learners to the topics that's going to be studied. We don't want to put actual content on there, so even though, say, this block of text here is really relevant, if it's communicating information, there's a better way that we can arrange that on our Moodle course page. So really the point to take away here is that we want to use our Moodle course pages as a launch pad for content, not as a place to keep content itself. So how do we go about that? Well, what we can do is we can go into our summary editor here and we can cut out this block of text here. We still want our learners to engage with that, but we just don't want it to be on our actual course screen. So we'll cut that out and we'll paste it into a Word document, or better still, a Moodle page, which is something we'll look at a little bit later, which is a bit like a Word document but hosted in Moodle. Once we have that, we can then just put that as a little icon in beneath our description, which means that all of that big block of text is consolidated into one single icon. As a general rule of thumb, I think it's good practice in a Moodle course that if your learners were sitting looking at a topic, here's the start of the topic up here, and if we scroll down the page, here's the end of the topic down here. What your learners should be able to do is view an entire topic in its entirety in their browser window. So if you can see, there's nowhere I can put this that I can see the whole topic at one go. But when we manage to cut out this block of text and consolidate that into a Word document or a Moodle page, that's going to do that for us. So the first thing we're going to do is cut out that text and instead replace that with a Word document here that contains the same text. So I'm going to drop that in and just move it up to the top of my topic. And now you can see that the whole topic, start to end, fits in to my user's screen. We haven't lost anything, it's just not being displayed whenever they log in. They're going to use the course page as a launchpad to get to that content which is still there within that document. For our last point, I just want to scroll right down to the bottom of our Moodle course page here. And if we come down to the bottom, we can see that we have a few empty topics which we still have to fill with resources and content. By default, every Moodle course that's generated, assuming that it is generated under the default template, is going to have 10 topics, or weeks if you're organising your course by weeks, in the course for you to fill with your content. The problem with these is that it's not often that even at the start of the year we're going to be using all 10 of these topics. Whenever our users log into the page, they're going to see even our empty topics. They'll see all our wonderful full topics that we have filled with information, but they'll also see topic 4 with nothing under it, topic 5 with nothing under it, and so on and so forth. Even if we come over to the little eye icon and click on that to hide the topic, our users will still see that there's something there, but it's hidden. It will just tell them that topic 4 is unavailable because we've hidden it. Users coming to a VLE will probably have had experience with maybe other VLEs, and even if they haven't, we've all been to sites like Amazon or a search engine like Google or wherever it is, and the assumption is that if there's something on our screen, it should be clickable or it should have content in it. So for our final point, if you have empty topics or topics that you're not using, get rid of them, because they'll confuse your users and they'll also confuse others coming to visit your site. If you allow teachers to come in and see your content, or if there are inspectors or verifiers coming in to see your content, they'll wonder why they can't click into topic 4, or if there's something that they're not seeing in topic 4. So the way to get rid of the empty topics that you're not using is right down at the bottom of your page. In the bottom right hand corner of your topics, there's a plus and a minus. It's literally just a matter of clicking plus if you want to add a topic, or clicking minus to reduce the number of topics. So if we click our little minus key, we find that topic 10 disappears and we're left just with our 9 topics. And were we to do that 6 more times, in this case, we would be cut right back to topic 3 and have gotten rid of all those confusing empty topics. Okay, hopefully those ideas all made sense and you could see where they could be implemented in your own courses. The tips that we left you with there are some of the ones that I would consider to be best practice absolutes, and I hope you can see why. It's so important that your course is not only attractive but also easy to navigate and use, especially when we want our learners to spend a lot of time there. So let's move on to our next little section, which revolves around communication within your Moodle courses. Communication between the teacher and learner is vital. It's essentially what education is founded on. Equally though, we can recognise the value of communication between learner and learner. Peer instruction, one learner helping another learner's education, is incredibly valuable. So our next little demonstration covers 3 ways in which Moodle can improve how you and your students communicate with one another, and it'll last for around about 11 minutes. So we're back here on our fictitious Moodle course page, and I want to take a little look at the calendar, which is over here on the right hand side of the page. Now the calendar is created by default in most Moodle courses. It might just be in a slightly different order, that you might just need to move it up or down a little bit depending on where, but I've placed mine here at the top because I think it's a really useful little tool for organising your course and centralising information. Most of you will probably send out information about dates and times to your students, whether that's an assessment schedule or even just a basic timetable for lectures. The problem is, like anything else, whenever that's sent out on paper or it's emailed or it's placed in a repository somewhere, it's often hard for students to know where to go to get the right information. If you start to populate your Moodle course page and your Moodle calendar with all the information of dates and times that your students need, they're going to know to go back there to find the correct information. And that's really simple to do. If we look at our calendar here, we have a heading which is the current month, April 2014. We can navigate backwards and forwards months. But it's simply a matter of just clicking the little link into April 2014 to open up our calendar. So once our calendar loads, it loads into the month that we clicked on, and we can look at an overview of our calendar and see what events are coming up in the month. Or alternatively, we can click on New Event to post a new event to our calendar. So here on the new event page, we first need to dictate the type of event that it is. Is it just for people on your course, or is it for a specific user or group of users, or is it site-wide? Is it something that your entire institution is going to be involved in? And which would be useful for something like, say, academic holidays. You could put that in for the entire site. I'm going to put it in just for this specific course, and I'm just going to call the title Field Trip. If I wanted to, I could use the description box to put in an itinerary or information about what our students needed to bring with them. And then it's just a matter of popping the correct date in for the event. You'll note as well that if we wanted to, we could put in the duration of the event, and we could also repeat the event week after week. So you could put in even your class lectures and repeat them for every Monday at 9 o'clock or whenever your lectures might be. Once that's all filled in, we're just going to click Save Changes, and that will return us back to the main calendar. So back here now in our overview for April, we can see that in the 24th, our little field trip has been dropped in there. If we go back to the actual main course view itself, so back to our overall course, we can look over to the little calendar block that we saw initially and see now that all these events have popped up into our calendar. So if our students mouse over the 24th, they'll know that that's the date for the field trip, and they can click there to get more information. As you start to populate your Moodle page with more and more interactive activities for your students, so things like placing a section in your Moodle course page for your students to submit their assignments, you'll also see that the calendar becomes pre-populated with that information. So if we mouse over the 14th, for instance, here, we'll see that corresponds to an event where I've asked students to submit an assignment. And that's how useful the calendar is. It centralizes all that information in one place, so the students know that they can just simply pop onto their Moodle page to look at upcoming important dates. Moodle's a great place to host content for your students, so to post lectures, PowerPoint presentations, to post videos, Word documents, or links to online content. But one of the things that we want to try and focus on is moving away from Moodle just being a repository for information and to an actual location of learning itself. And one of the best ways to do that is to get your students talking and collaborating. So really the next tip that we want to look at is a couple of different ways to get your students communicating on your Moodle page. And the two best ways to do that are using a couple of communication tools called the chat activity and the forum activity. If I scroll down to the bottom of my topic here and click on add an activity or resource, you'll see they're both there. They're not difficult to add to your page. There's the chat activity, and down a little bit's the forum activity. So the chat activity is what would be termed synchronous conversation. It relies on all your students, or at least some of your students, or you and your students being in the chat room at the same time. So you're in the room along with your students. This is a virtual room where communication occurs. The forum, on the other hand, is slightly different. We would talk about it being asynchronous conversation. It doesn't rely on people being in the same place at the same time. A student or yourself, the lecturer or teacher, would post a question or a comment on the forum, and then just as soon as someone else saw it, they would then post a reply for it. So the conversation happens over a period of time, unlike in the chat option where the conversation happens at a very set and specific point in time. One of the important things to note when you're adding the chat or the forum activity is where you place it, because that can be really important. If we scroll up my page a little bit, you'll note here that what I've done is placed a forum directly underneath PowerPoint slides relating to a lecture. And I've put in a little comment just in there to say any questions about this week's lecture, feel free to discuss them, and the teacher will answer as many questions as they need to. The great thing about this is there's a little bit of peer assessment going on with the forum. Your students may well be looking at your lecture slides at 11 o'clock at night when you're not necessarily going to be online. But there could be 3 of your students looking at their lecture slides at 11 o'clock at night. And if one of them has a question and posts it in the forum, one of their peers might notice it and be able to come in and instruct them through a simple content. The chat channel, on the other hand, there's a couple of ways you might want to use that. You might want to have it at a specific time for, say, a virtual class. So you know that your students are going to be at home working on material for blended learning, working through a set activity that you've given them at home, and you have agreed that you'll make yourself available in the chat channel between 1 o'clock and 2 o'clock to discuss any problems that they might have. Alternatively, you might use that to monitor the back channel within your class. So you'll open up the chat channel during your lecture so that if your students have any questions or comments, they'll post it in the chat. You can keep an eye on it, and their peers again can keep an eye on it. So if a question crops up in the lecture and they maybe don't want to raise their hand to ask you, they'll use the chat channel to ask their peers. You're at that point harnessing that back channel to see what's going on in class while you're teaching. Now, our next idea sort of ties in a little bit with our previous webinar on student response systems. And the idea here really is that you could use something like the choice activity in Moodle to poll your students to get their responses. That not only leads to, say, more dynamic and adaptive teaching on your part, but it also gives you an idea of where your learners are at in terms of their own process of learning. If you take a little look at the Moodle pages in front of me here, I've actually put two little polls up to give you an idea of where you might want to use the choice activity. Then we'll actually have a look at how we build one of these. So here in the page, right towards the start of this topic, I have placed an entrance poll asking the question, are we environmentally aware? It's to fit in with this fictitious course. So our users would come in, they would click into this little entrance poll, they would make their choice from the different options that I've given them, and they would save that. That would give me an immediate idea of where I think the students are at, but also I'm sort of asking them to be introspective, to think about where they think they're at with their awareness. What I've then done next is, the next thing they're going to do in this topic is they're going to watch a video on environmental awareness, on the big topics of the environment. And then below that video, once they've finished watching it, I've placed an exit poll, asking them again to think about how environmentally aware they actually are. So what I've done is I'm actually trying to assess how much they're learning from this video, because one would think that here they would feel very, not necessarily that they're completely aware of everything, but that they have a fair idea. But maybe after watching a video, they realize they're not as aware as they should be, and hopefully those results would come through for us in our exit poll. So that's just one example or idea of how you might use that, but you could use it in many different ways. You could use it to get your students' opinion on an issue or a topic before they came to class. You could use it to really quickly see what the majority of students think an answer is to a certain question, even allowing anonymity in these choices and polls to prevent your students from feeling awkward if they're a little shy. So how do we actually add one? Well, it's pretty simple in Moodle. Like everything else, we come down to our add an activity or resource, and once that loads, we just under the activity section just choose choice and click add. So once our choice activity settings loads, we have a couple of things that we need to put in. We need to give our choice activity a name, and then we need to also put a little description, bearing in mind, of course, that with the description, we need to actually pose the question to our students. And once we've done that information, we can scroll on down then to come to the actual options themselves. So these are the choices, the responses that our students are going to make. So we have a couple of settings. First of all, allow choice to be updated. Will our users be able to change their choice once they make it, or is it once they've confirmed it, is that it? They can no longer go back and change their response. Limit the number of responses allowed means, do we only want a set number of students to reply to each option? The reason that this is here is it will allow you to, say, split your group up into different camps. So you could say that I want 5 people in option 1, 5 people in option 2, 5 people in option 3. Everybody vote, and then they would pick the options they wanted, but no more than 5 could ever pick one option, and you set the limit there in the little box beneath the options that you're choosing. I'm going to leave mine to not limit it because I just want to get a quick overview of where all my students stand with a certain question. So the next thing we're going to do is fill in each of these individual options. So we'll just put in the different options they can choose. And of course, I just picked some very, very quick ideas there. You'd obviously think a lot more about the kind of responses that you're going to put your choice activity, put into your choice activity. We can add more fields if we want to. If the 5 that are predefined are not enough, you can add more. But once you're happy with all your choices, it's just a matter of clicking save and return to course to go back to your main page. And when we come back to your course page, then, like always, Moodle will have dropped that choice activity at the very bottom of our topic. So it's just a matter of grabbing that and moving it to wherever you want it to be. So hopefully that gives you some ideas as to how you can use the choice activity on your Moodle course page. Okay, so those are just a few ways that you can harness tools already existing within the Moodle VLE to improve the flow of information within your classes. You can hopefully see, however, that there's often no point in just using them for the sake of using them. In the case of the chat, forum and choice activities, the strategic placement of those activities to best engage with your learners is the most important thing to get right. Okay, we're just going to pause here for just a brief moment, and what I'm going to do is put a little poll up on screen for you all to reply to. So the question that we're asking here is, which of the following communication tools have you used with your students? And you can select more than one answer. So I'll just give you a couple of seconds here to submit your responses, just so we can get an idea of what communication tools folks are using. Okay, I think most of the results are probably through there. I'll just pop those up on screen so everyone can see them. So by far the most popular choice there was email. So presumably most of you are using something like the student email accounts to disseminate information out to your students. And even that was sort of a process of instilling that ethos within your students to always check their student email accounts for information. So much like with that, when you start to use your Moodle page to disseminate information to your learners and communicate with them, it's that same idea. You want to keep the idea that all the information is going to be centralized on your Moodle page. You want your students to always go there to check for information and to communicate with one another to find the answers to the question they're looking for. Okay, that's great. Thanks very much for replying there, folks. That's super. We'll move on to our final section now, and that final section just centers on using Moodle itself to build up some teaching and learning content. So we're probably all familiar with keeping our files in Moodle, Word documents that we've created, PowerPoints we've designed, and so on and so forth. Moodle, however, offers a variety of ways for you to create content within the VLE itself, effectively replacing the need for you to upload your Word documents and other files to it. So in this final demonstration, we're going to look at two tools within Moodle that you can use to both create and deliver content to your learners. So we're back here in our fictitious course, and we can see that in this topic here we've started to collect some documents that our students are going to use as part of their course. We have uploaded a Word document, which is a little introduction to this topic, alternative energy, and then below that we've collected 5 PDF documents, which are all examples of alternative energy. And we've just done that by creating the Word document or the PDF files, or finding them online and uploading those to our Moodle course site. When our students come to the page, they'll simply click on the little link, they'll download the Word document or the PDF file to their computer, and they can read it that way. But what happens if, say for instance, you've uploaded a Word document in a newer format and your students are using an old version of Word? Or what happens if you've created a document or a file on a Mac and you've uploaded that to your Moodle site and then your students find that they can't open it? Well, those are just some examples of why our next tip is really useful. And that tip is to create as much of your content as possible in Moodle itself. And we're going to look at a couple of tools within Moodle that lets us do that. Particularly, we're going to relate to these documents here. So how can we take these, this one Word document and these 5 PDFs and actually wrap them up in Moodle as opposed to in these PDF and Word documents? If I scroll down the page a little bit, just to the end of the topic where we can see add an activity or resource, I'm going to click on that. And we're going to look at 2 things now that will help us to create content within Moodle. Let's scroll down the page a little bit till the resources section. And you can see here the 2 things that we're going to look at. The first is the page. So the page is really just a piece of white space on Moodle that we can use to put content in. The page will be one single section. We'll type out whatever we want. We can put pictures into it if we want. We can put videos into it if we want. And that will serve as a page of notes effectively for our students. Further on up the resources column, we have the book. And a book is effectively just a collection of pages all held together in one place. So hopefully, if you're thinking along the same lines as I am, you can see how we're going to be able to use these to package up this content that we have in the background. We'll be able to take the content from our Word document and put that into a page. We'll be able to take the content from these 5 PDF documents and create a book from that content. So how are we going to do that? Well, let's start with the page. I'm going to click on page and I'm going to click add. So when our page editor loads, the first thing I want to do is give our page of notes a little name and a little description. Unlike all other text editors in Moodle, we can use the bold or italics or underline to give this some formatting if we wish. Coming on down this web page, then we move into the content, which is the page content itself, the actual notes that we're going to put onto your page. Now here what we can do is really as simple as before we had a Word document sitting on our Moodle page. So we can open that same Word document and simply just copy that little portion of text and paste that into our Moodle page. So exactly the same notes are being posted on Moodle. We have a hard copy of it sitting there on our My Documents or our desktop or wherever, but the notes themselves are going to be held in this page format in Moodle. Because they're in Moodle, we can then apply any kind of styling or formatting we want to it. And if we expand our little editor here, we can use buttons, say for instance like the insert or edit image to put a little image into our Moodle page, like so. Or we could even use the Moodle media button to upload a video or soundbite from our computer, include that in the page, or to link to a YouTube video and include that again on our page. So you can see how not only the page pulls together the notes that we would have had in our Word document, but it also allows us to put audio, visual, and multimedia elements in there as well. Once we finish with our page of notes, it's just a matter of clicking save and return to course to take us back to our main page. And like always in Moodle, that's just inserted that at the bottom of our topic. So it's just a matter of pulling that up to the top where we want it. And we can also then just get rid of the Word document that we no longer need. Now, the next part then, we're going to come back and have a look at that page in a little second, but let's sort out our PDFs first by combining them into a book. So the same process, add an activity or resource, scroll down to book and click add. Now, setting a book up is a little bit different to setting a page up, because in our general settings here, the first thing we have to do is just add our name and description, just as we did with the page, but the next step's a little bit different. So once we've entered that information, we can scroll down the page, and instead of returning to your course, we're going to click Save and Display, because effectively all we've done here is we've added a cover sheet to our book. We now need to add the contents to it. So we're going to Save and Display, display being our currently empty book. So this new page has now loaded for us where we have to add the first chapter of our book. Now in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use, each chapter is going to be one of those 5 PDF documents that we previously saw on it. Now you can play about with yours and add sub-chapters and have different sort of levels of chapters, but I'm just going to have one chapter for each of my PDF files. So the first thing I want to do is I want to title my first chapter with the first PDF file title, the first example of alternative energy. And then just exactly the same process as with our Word document. If we have the PDF sitting on our computer, we can just open it up, highlight all the text that we need, and copy that. And then just paste that into our little content box here on the Moodle page. And again, now that it's in Moodle, if we want, we can expand our little text editor and apply any kind of formatting that we want to it. I'm just going to save the changes that I've made there now. And that's dropped the first chapter then of our book in. If we want to add another one, you'll see over here on, in my case, the left hand side, but again in your version of Moodle it might be slightly different. We have a table of contents. Chapter 1 relates to this first chapter on biomass. If we want to add another chapter, so in my case it would be my second PDF file, I would just click the little plus icon which says add a new chapter, and that'll let me add my second PDF, my third PDF, and so on and so forth. And once we continue that process and we finish it, what we eventually end up with, if I flick over to a different tab here, is a full collected book on examples of alternative energy. So I'm going to just click into this now so that you can see what the full collected version looks like. So click into that. And that loads up my first chapter. We can see from our table of contents, if we want to navigate to one of the other chapters, we can just click on it, or we can use the forward and back arrows to say move on to our next chapter. And that just opens up our second chapter. And again, we can click forward to go on to the next one, or back to go back to our first chapter. Just as a final little note on books and pages, I'm going to pop back to my main course page here to show you one final benefit of building your content in Moodle using books and pages. So back here on our main course page, we can see we've got our page and our book here. Now, if you imagine instead that these were PDF files or Word documents, number one, there'd be an awful lot more of them. The second thing is that say for instance in your Word document you noticed a mistake that had cropped up, or at the start of the following year you knew that you had to go back and change the dates on your Word document. To do that you would have to go into the Moodle site, delete the Word document, open up the Word document on your computer, make the changes, save that document, and then re-upload it to your Moodle site. Whenever you've built the content on Moodle using books and pages, it's simply a matter of coming over to edit, clicking edit, and going to edit settings and saving your changes. That's it. It's a much quicker process, and it saves you having to re-upload maybe 6 or 7 documents every single time. So those are a few of the real benefits of building content in Moodle using books and pages. Okay, so hopefully you can see where those two particular examples have value within a Moodle course and how you might even employ them within your own courses just to consolidate and tidy up information, but also make it a little easier for you to edit the content that you're posting. Okay folks, hopefully we've given you some food for thought for today. Apologies that we ran a little bit over there, but we're finishing up now, so does anyone have any final questions just before we finish? Okay, I can't see any questions coming through. I'll maybe press on, folks, but Lisa and I will be in the room for another 10 minutes or so afterwards. So if anyone would like to ask any questions, we'll be about just to answer those for the next little while. I'll put our contact details up here on screen, folks. If you'd like any more help with any of the examples we've covered today, we'd be more than happy to meet with you. Feel free to drop either of us an email, and the addresses for that are on screen at the minute. We've a wealth of experience in Moodle here at RSCni, so we're only too happy to share that. So if there's anything from today's session you'd like to explore, or anything else that you'd like to try in Moodle but just need a little bit of support with, please do feel free to get in touch. If you'd like details of future webinars, then check out the RSCni website. Okay, that's all from us for today. As I say, Lisa and I will stay on in the chat room for a few minutes afterwards, so please feel free to keep your questions coming through. But until the next time, I'll say cheerio for now.